in my league. Got a blockbuster on the way and a pickup up my sleeve. They call my team insane, say I'm the one to beat. So you better bring your A game and start playing.
Welcome to another episode of the Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational Podcast. I am Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst for friendsoffantasybenefits.com. Joining me on this episode is Doug Dennis, and in spite of the fact that he points out that I say that many people that come on are among my favorite people in the industry, Doug is one of them. Doug is a really, really good guy. When I was brand new in the industry, he would come on the Friends of Fantasy Benefits podcast and talk bullpens with us. He's just a really fun guy to hang out with in person and just banter with on the internet. And he's a big fan of my wife, which never hurts someone's cause, in my opinion, at least. Definitely follow him on Twitter. Follow his work over at Baseball HQ. And come out to First Pitch Arizona. If you're interested in that, it's going to hopefully be happening this year in mid-October. Me and the wife are going to come out and we talk about that, as well as some great stories that Doug tells about people in the industry, about his relationship with his wife, about how he got into fantasy baseball. So buckle up, stay tuned, enjoy this podcast with Doug Dennis of Baseball HQ. Joining me now is Doug Dennis from Baseball HQ. Doug, welcome to the show.
Thank you much. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you. You were one of my favorite people in the industry, so and one of the ones who actually would come on my podcast when I first started. So I always appreciate talking to you.
Well, I appreciate that, but I've heard you say that to so many people that I don't feel it's a compliment that I used to think it was.
Yeah, but not many of them came on the early days of Friends of Fantasy Benefits. When we were like zany and had no any sort of direction. We were just throwing random baseball stuff out, and you were always on board to come on and talk.
I was, but I think I was less. I didn't understand that Matt Thompson would ambush me with crap I didn't even know what he was talking about, or Mike Warner would be like, "Okay, Doug, but tell me this," and I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what you just said. What was that? So, yeah, to some extent, yeah, I was willing to come on, but I don't know that it went as well for you guys as,
Well, to be honest, that hasn't changed with those two.
No, I know. I know now. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Doug, before we get rolling, remind everybody where you can reach on social media.
I am at Doug Dennis 41 on Twitter, and I am not on any other social media whatsoever. You can reach me by snail mail, but I'm not going to tell you my address because
that's probably for the best. You might get a Justin Mason swimsuit sent to your house,
or the IRS might hear the podcast, and that'd be bad. So
yeah. All right, let's talk about your TGFBI team, and I kind of mentioned to you before we started. I know actually look at how well teams are doing before I ask someone on, or before we even start talking. And so it brought up your team. You're doing really well. You're first in your league, 33rd overall. That's got to feel pretty good.
It feels really good. I'm glad you got me on in June, because I think by September you would not have me on probably. But
I don't know. This is a team that I think can still compete in spite of the fact that you're 33rd overall, first in your league. It's not like it's been necessarily smooth sailing. You took Carrasco. You haven't gotten anything out of him. Kyle Hendricks has not been Kyle Hendricks, yet you're still competing and doing very well. So if you can get Kyle Hendricks to continue this recent hot stretch and get anything from Carrasco, that could be a real good sign. You could move your way up to number one.
Oh, I don't know about number one. I just want to beat Shelley.
Oh, okay.
I got to beat Shally because a few years ago I was in her league and she absolutely murdered me. She was so good and I was not. So I just want to beat Shally so I can send her the little shark symbol, because that's who she is, and remind her that every once in every 10 years I can beat her.
Shelly's a good player. I'm very much liking pairing with her in the tag team league, because
I think that's good. It's kind of if I were pairing with her, I'd be like the amateur and she'd be like Tiger Woods.
Absolutely. She's carrying all the weight, and I appreciate that because I like money, And
Yes.
it's much easier to win money when you have someone smart on your team. If you can't beat them, join them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You that's the best pick of all, having Shelly on your team.
I think so. It was even better than Vlad Guerrero or Cedric Mullins, who we both have on that team. So
Yeah.
Do you have any weaknesses on this team that you're afraid of? Like, are you weak in any certain categories? Is there something that you're like, oh, you know what, I'm going to have to keep working on this all throughout the year?
Well, I intended to get saves, but I didn't really do a great job. And then the ones I've had, I've been like, here's a guy who got some saves and now he got hurt or he's not the closer. So I've been kind of cycling through, and you can kind of see I'm limping along. I think I even have Michael Fulmer active right now to tell you how bad that category is. So that if I could solve for that, if someone just fell out of the heavens and turned into Craig Kimbrell, I'd be pretty happy.
Yeah, that's been, I think, an issue for a lot of people this year is saves. I mean, especially for like in my TGFBI league, I thought I had nailed saves, right? I drafted Trevor Rosenthal. I got Archie Bradley. I got Jonathan Hernandez and Nick Whitgren. I'm like, oh, I've got 2 locked-in closers, and then I've got some guys who could easily come on and get some saves. I even picked up Zach Britton to cover for the Chapman suspension early on in the season, right? I'll get a few there, drop him, and then move on to the next guy. And I have been cycling through closers left and right ever since.
Yeah, that list you just gave me explains a lot.
Yeah, right. And my wife was like, Jake McGee, I don't know, like he's probably not very good, but he's gonna be on the Giants, and I love the Giants. And she's got like 40 fucking saves.
Yeah. Is she beating you, by the way?
Currently, no. Currently, I've got about 100-point spot lead on her. I passed her about 2 weeks ago in the overall, and have not yet looked back. I'm sure I will crap the bed at some point.
Is she still a catcher on your roster?
No, I dropped her in the Raz Bowl or Raz Slam League after the first Fab period. I had a team that was actually competing, and I couldn't really afford to roster her as a catcher anymore.
Wow. Okay. Well,
I have not heard the end of that either.
I bet. I hope it was worth it.
It wasn't, because since then I've actually dropped from first place in my league to 4th place, and now I'm going, well, you know what? I wasted the opportunity to just say I had her on my team the entire season.
You did.
Because I'm not going to win the league.
It's worse than not picking her up at all because you actually dropped her.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure at the time I dropped her, I was like 8th place in the overall.
Oh my gosh.
And my team has just kind of gone downhill ever since.
Yeah, this is yeah. I'm sorry to hear that.
I mean, this is like really what a microcosm of what marriage is, right? Like, you think you're making the best right decision for yourself, but you obviously weren't and should have listened to your wife to begin with.
Yeah, I won't tell you it because it's a really long story, but I have a story about being at a horse track with my wife and not listening to her, and boy, did that not pay off.
I actually want to hear this story now.
Okay, well, we were at a horse track, and I was with a group of friends. She was along too. It was kind of fun, we had a good day. And I'm chintzy, so I was making these little bets all day long. And I was picking jockeys. I don't care about the horse. I'm like, if this is a good jockey, he probably is picking a good horse, and I have a good chance. And I was making a little bit of money all day long. And by the end, we got to the last race of the day. I'm like the only one by a long shot that won tons of money. I actually won a lot of money. And the last race, my wife's name is Kate. Okay. And the last race of the day, Explosive Kate, 70-1. She goes, what would be fun if we put all the money on Explosive Kate that you've won today? And I'm like, it's like $1,500. I mean, that was a lot of money to me then. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I said, so I'm not doing that. So no. And she was fuming. And she took like $50 out of her wallet and put it on the horse. And I'm like, I wouldn't put it on a 70-1 to win. That doesn't make any sense. Put it on it to like show. So, if it loses, it loses. But, I think you'd have a better chance of getting some money out of it. That damn horse won the race. And I got to tell you, there's no amount of money that made that Like if I had spent $100,000 and lost it, it would have been better than Explosive Kate winning that race if we won the way it did.
How many years ago was this?
27.
And I'm assuming you've still never heard the end of it.
Never. If a horse comes up in conversation, and I don't mean a racehorse, I mean like someone rode a horse a week ago and tells her about it. She goes, "Let me tell you a story." And
does she tell it the exact same way?
Yeah.
Okay. I was assuming there are other details that are added.
There aren't any details. She's just she has a lot of hyperbole in her stories. I don't think there's anything different from my story, but it's a lot of embellishment about how she saw the horse. She knew it was a good horse. It had a great name, obviously. She didn't understand why it was 70-1. I don't think, I thought that it was possible that she would take the car keys and leave me at the track. That's how angry she was.
I mean, she would have been well within her right.
Well, gee, I'm glad you're on her side. Yeah.
I figure my wife's going to be on her side, so I might as well start sucking up.
Yeah, I said, here's all of the money we won today. And she goes, I don't want it. I don't care. I don't want it. Thanks for nothing.
See, that was a story worth telling. I appreciate that. Getting back to your TGFBI team, you've had some really, really nice late picks that I'm sure have really helped out. Alzolay has been fantastic. Ryan Reynolds is a guy that I was talking about with some people recently, which was like, he was like the perfect example of guys I was in on this year, except for some reason it wasn't Brian Reynolds. Like I just, for some reason, just completely avoided him. Were these two guys like big targets of yours coming into the season, or did you just like the price at the time?
Well, I'll take Alzolay first. I really thought he was going to be really good this year. And there's a lot. I could give you a list of guys that I thought was going to be really good this year, and most of them were not. But he was. So I'll take a little credit for thinking he would be good. And the reason is because it seemed to me that he really improved a lot late last year. Strikeout rate was good. I just felt like if he got a chance to be in the rotation, that he had, the Cubs are pretty good. So I just figured that he would have that and would get me a lot of strikeouts. And if the ERA worked out, then perfect. And Reynolds was a target for me last year, and he kind of stunk it up last year. But he had a great year the year before that. And I really was looking at somebody who would help me, I didn't really think I needed the home run so much. I just needed a guy to get me regular at bats. And he was that guy. And at that point in the draft, and he's actually been hitting some home runs lately, which is just weird, but I'll take it.
Yeah, he was one of those guys that, I really liked him in 2019, so I profited really well. And then I carried that love over to 2020 and got burnt.
Yeah.
And then obviously I faded him this year, thinking, he burnt me last year.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of guys, like I went back to the well on Untargeted. My most publicized, guy is like Cedric Mullins, where he was a guy that kind of disappointed people the previous two seasons. And I just kept digging and going, you know what? No, I believe in this guy. They're letting him lead off at the end of the season. So I don't know why I didn't do that with a guy like Brian Reynolds.
Well, you probably got Mullins instead of Reynolds. I don't think you'd be unhappy about that.
No, yeah. It worked out. I just, there's no worse feeling than being in on a guy from the beginning, and then like the year he has like the really big breakout, you were off, and you're just like kicking yourself. Well, I could have stuck with it one more year.
Yeah, well, Mullins is having a big breakout. I wouldn't say that Reynolds is having a big breakout. He's doing almost exactly what I thought he would do, except he's been hitting a few more home runs than I thought. But, the thing about getting Reynolds on the Pirates is like, who else are they going to play? Unless he's hurt, he's playing. Because they're horrible,
And that's one of the things, like I was, targeting with guys like Cedric Mullins, guys like Hayes, like all these guys on these bad teams, they're not at risk at losing playing time, even if they struggle. Teams are just going to give them rope to kind of go out there and play.
Yeah, Mountcastle's a good example of that with Baltimore because he was terrible to begin with, and they didn't care. It's like, just get out there and keep going, and now he's playing great. I mean, it's baseball's like that. I mean, everybody in the industry knows that. I mean, it's just although in our and I'm sure it's true, but our teams typically in a league like this are pretty stacked with real players, and so if your guys start slow and you need that slot, then it's like, do I keep him? And then the minute you get rid of them, they go on a heater. And
I mean, how many people dropped Kyle Gibson after his first start of the season?
Boy,
and have been kicking themselves ever since.
Yeah, I mean that, and who could see that coming? I mean, I always laugh at Kyle Gibson all the time, and I'm like, well, and he's on, he's like on Texas. I mean, it's just like, who wants that guy? Nobody.
I mean, I've been like a big Kyle Gibson guy, but I didn't see this coming. Like, I thought, he might be a guy who doesn't get shut down at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Because Texas doesn't care if his arm falls off.
Yeah, no, but I always think, like, even if he starts okay, it's like, 1, he's Kyle Gibson. 2, he's on Texas. And 3, when it gets hot, he's going to have like a 7 ERA. So yeah. I always think that. And then, this year, good Lord.
It's been nice. He's been one of my few good guys on like a lot of my teams. Him and Cedric Mullins holding up my really bad early picks.
That's good. I think a lot of people are getting burnt because their early picks got hurt. I mean, it isn't like they were bad picks. It's just serendipity. So
I think this year is just going to be a battle of attrition.
Yeah, no, I think so too.
I mean,
like half over. I always look at my team, like this team, and I'm like, well, so far so good, but I could have 3 injuries this week, and then that's the end of that.
I know you don't play in a ton of leagues in the way like I play in 29 leagues, but like,
oh my God, what?
It's a problem, and it's something I'm gonna have to address with a therapist in the off season. But it's shocking to me, like going between teams on fab days or on like setting lineup days, and going, man, the difference between some of my teams which don't have many injuries and the ones that like I've got NFBC 50 and draft and hold leagues, DCs.
Yeah.
Where like I can't field a full roster.
Oh my gosh.
With 50-man rosters because of the injuries. I've had one league where I've been starting Eric Sogard all season.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you about that. That's I'm in one of those leagues. It's an Arizona Fall League Speaker League, and I love that league, but I'm it always ends up whoever doesn't get hurt is always near the top, and that's been true forever. I mean, because those draft and hold, you got to have your people that you drafted early in there, the ones who are late. Although I will say I had Arozarena last year really late, and I never used him. I never cottoned on to the fact, like, he had a great week, and I'm like, yeah, that was his good week, and I missed it. And then I didn't have him the next week, and then he had another great week, and like I didn't use him again, and yeah. So I mean, even then, it's like,
that's always a difficult part. Like I was talking with Paul the other day, and he's like, he's got Jonathan Scope on a team, and like he was like he missed like the first run of it, and it's like, well, it's probably over now, and now he's missing the second run of it.
He's had. I looked him up before this call, not because of Paul or but like what he had. Over the last 30 days, he's been on fire. Like, it's crazy. He has like a 442 OBP. I bet he hasn't ever had that for a 30-day period ever in his career, like ever.
My theory is that the GM of the Tigers came down to him when he was struggling with it and said, listen, if you play really well, we'll be able to trade you and you get to leave Detroit. And he was like, deal.
They should try that with all their players, see if it works.
Last question on your TGFBI team, because I think a lot of people know you from watching you play in Tout Wars and Labor, and though you're typically playing in AL and NL leagues, right?
Yeah.
And you go in often with the strategy of don't spend a ton on pitching, spend a lot on hitting. In this league, obviously it's a 15-team mix and it's NFBC. You spent on pitching. I mean, 4 of your first 6 picks were starting pitchers. Is that just a difference in the format?
Yes. I mean, if you're, my thinking on this is that if you are doing a snake draft, which, NFBC, leagues mostly are, at least the ones I'm in, you have to get a balanced roster. You can't, there's no trading, and you can't afford to have, a couple categories where it's tanked, and because, you're going to be, it doesn't work. You have to have a balanced roster. And I believe there's a lot more risk with pitching than there is with hitting. And so you kind of have to aim at getting that pitching, early before you miss it. So, so with this, I thought I would, I'd kind of go balanced, one of each, all the way through. But, when something presents itself, you get that. With things like NL labor, so it's lopsided, right? I mean, there's only 9 pitching slots, but it's NL. And so you can really make a lot of money if you get some middle relievers who have great ERA and whip and get you some strikeouts, vulture some wins. It doesn't work as well in the AL side. On the AL side, you need pitchers, and you have those extra hitter slots because there's DHs, so you get a lot of extra at-bats on the AL side. I haven't quite figured the AL out because I played NL for so long, but I mean, you can get away with, $40 out of $260 in an NL only labor league. And then you move stuff around because you can trade, you can find guys, on the waiver wire and things like that. And it works fine. And then that helps you with the risk, because if you lose a hitter in NL, you're just never going to, you're just going to have an empty slot, unless you make a trade. So it's very, very different types of leagues. And it's funny. I'm sure you see this too, but people are like, oh, all those idiots who play those leagues. And I'm like, well, it's just a different game. It's like one's a shot put and one is a marathon. I mean, they're not, it's just different. I don't know how else to put it, but I also always think it's funny because, a lot of those guys are bankrolled in, 50 leagues. And so good. I'm glad you were good in your 10 out of 50. I'm only got 6 leagues. What do you want from me? I guess they want me to be in 50 leagues is what they want, and then see what happens. Maybe I'd only be good in 5 out of 50. That's very possible.
I mean, I think that it is. I think playing in so many leagues takes away from my overall success. I think if I played in 4 or 5 leagues, I'd probably win, 50%, 75% of my leagues each year. But I enjoy playing in so many. And even if it costs me a little bit, it's really good for my prep work. It's really good for my analysis. But I totally understand why people don't want to play in 50 leagues, because the leagues itself become a full-time job.
I think that people should do what they have the most fun doing. So if you enjoy playing lots of leagues and that's your thing, then do that. Absolutely. For my part, I like playing. I'm only in 6 leagues, but every single one of them is a completely different format. I have one of those 50-player draft and hold things. I have, TGFBI. I have an AL league for tout and an NL league for labor, and I have a dynasty league of AFL old timers that I love. That league, that's an insane, weird format, but it's fun. So they're all totally different. What you can do to acquire players or move stuff around is totally different, and I like having the differences, because I think that. On any given week, I'm ready to throw up my hands with one thing, but the other thing is going well, and so I check that out, and it's nice.
I do kind of miss playing in some of those different formats, because I think 12-team, 15-team mixed leagues have just become the standard, right? Yeah. And that's typically what we have to cater our advice to. It's what we typically get invited to play. I really loved being an NL tout. Because I mean, my first league was an AL only 4x4 league.
Yeah.
That was 25 years old when I joined it 20 years ago.
And you got stuff by fax to see what the standings were. Yeah,
yeah. And so I love this is the first year in. Let's see, I started playing fantasy 20 years ago, and this is the first year I don't have an only league. And I miss it. I do. Last year I had NL tout and a couple other AL, NL leagues. I think the mono leagues are my favorite format to play. It's just hard to get people to play them.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. I mean, I think most people are much more used to playing the format like TGFBI than anything else. I mean, I think that's what it's become, and that's fine. I mean, I think like I said before, I think whatever people have the most fun doing, that's what they should do. I really like trading, so I like leagues that allow and let me do that kind of thing. Although I will say in that dynasty league, I keep Ian Kahn keeps calling me, and I'm like, send me an email, dude. Like, don't call me. Like, in bed and not thinking straight, and he's like, no, Doug, I got this great idea. What do you think about this? Would you do this or that? And it's like, that's like 42 different trade offers, and I can't even think about one. So maybe I'll call you back in a week. I don't know. I mean, he's pretty funny. He's pretty insane, but he can't wait to make a trade. And I keep thinking to myself, you know what? That dude is the Tampa Bay Rays. I don't think I should be trading with the Tampa Bay Rays.
Absolutely.
If you're the Pirates calling me, I'm on it. But, I'm not trading with the Rays. I know how that ends up.
I mean, I've known Ian now for a few years and played with him in a number of different leagues and different formats. He has, I wouldn't even say like it's he likes to trade. Like, this is a serious addiction. I think at Tout Wars next year, we should have some sort of intervention for him. I imagine his basement at home looks like the Bat Cave, but it's all centered around trading.
Oh, yeah. And there's Alfred over there doing stats for him, and it's like, hey, Alfred, who has this player? That's the player I need. That would complete my team. And Alfred's like, Doug Dennis has that player. I'm like, God damn it. Don't Alfred. No, don't have him call me at 10 at night and figure out how to get that player from me. Yeah. It's incredible though, because I think he's doing this all like off the top of his head. And I'm like, I got to get my papers around me before I can even talk to you. Like, it's not even fair. Like, I'm like, you know what you're doing. And I'm like, not. So.
He's a professional actor. He has the background information and story all in his head before he even dials those numbers.
And he's like way too smooth a talker.
Yeah.
Like, Doug, man, I think you're like a great player. Like, do you, dude? I don't think you do. I think it's like you're at the bar trying to pick somebody up, which is my best player. That's what I think's happening.
True story. He called me one day, and I was sitting out having a cigarette, and my wife was kind of listening in the background. And I finished talking to him and stuff, and hang up. And she goes, as soon as you guys started talking the trade portion of things, your voice changed.
Yeah. I mean, my wife has not heard him, but I think that if my wife heard him trying to talk me into a trade, I would hang up and she would go, why didn't you do that trade? That guy seemed great. That's what I think would happen. So I would keep her away from that. Yeah.
He's in my Tout Wars league this year. We're both in the mixed auction. And he made, I believe it was 5 trades one morning before lock.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane.
Doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me.
Let's talk a little bit about you. When did you start becoming a fan of baseball? Like, did you grow up with it? Is something you were into as a kid?
Yeah, I grew up in Fort Myers, Florida, and our local spring training team was the Kansas City Royals, and they were playing at Terry Park, which is about the size of like a wooden bleachers high school, mid-level team. I mean, that's how little that stinking park was. And you could show up there on your bike and run into Cookie Rojas pulling into the parking lot, and he would play catch with you. I mean, that's how ridiculous things were back then. And, I think it cost $1 to get in with a ticket, and it was general admission, and you could sit wherever because the seats weren't even marked. So yeah, I would do a lot of that with my friends, and that was a lot of fun. And and my dad worked for a newspaper, and he would always, and it had nothing to do with sports, but he would get us invited to the Royals had a big barbecue at the end of every year, even when I was a little kid. And so we would end up going to this bar. I mean, you can't even imagine it nowadays, but they would have this barbecue at the Ramada Inn. And it would be all the players, the coaches, their wives, kids, sisters, whatever, and then hangers-oners like my dad and me and other people who just got in there. And pretty soon you'd be in the line getting potato salad and baked beans with Whitey Herzog. And I could never help myself. I'd always yell at him and say, "Why did you keep Andy Hassler instead of Marty Patton? Marty Patton's a much better pitcher than Andy Hassler." And Whitey Herzog would like, "I don't care, kid. Andy Hassler's a lefty." And I go, "I don't care, Whitey, because he stinks." And and I was always that obnoxious, horrible kid. And I'm sure Whitey Herzog's like, "Don't let that kid in here ever again." and then a month into the season, I would write a letter to Whitey Herzog, and I'd say, "I told you Andy Hassler stunk," like the day after they cut him, and it was like obnoxious and stupid, but I was like no filter little kid. But anyway, I've always been like that, and I've always liked baseball, and there's never been a time where I have not paid very, very close attention. And actually, I used to have, I'm sure lots of people did this, but I used to have a little stupid game that I would play, with cards and my little brother. We wouldn't even be outside. We'd be sitting in the air conditioning playing, and we'd have a deck of cards, and you turn the cards over and the combination creates a hit or a double or a homer or whatever. And it was random. So, the best players might be hitting 105, and the worst player, like, Mario Mendoza might lead the league in homers because it was completely random what the cards, came up with. But we kept track of every single game and every play. And, it was like, it was stupid and wasted a lot of time, but it was kind of fun.
Do you think that kind of like game that you would play with your brother, like, made it a real easy transition into playing fantasy baseball?
I would like to say that, but and you'll relate maybe a little to this. I'd never heard of fantasy baseball until the first time I saw that Glenn Wagner book, which was probably I want to say like early '90s. My wife and I were in a bookstore in Seattle. I lived in Seattle at the time, and I bought it. I bought this book. And I read it, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's like having two suns in the sky. This is the greatest thing ever." And I just got to find people who will do this with me. And the next day, I couldn't find that book. Like, I knew where I put it, and I wasn't around. And I'm like, "Have you seen my book?" And my wife said, I saw you last night, and I decided to throw it away. Because that was going to wreck our marriage. I mean, we weren't going to throw it away. I hope that's okay. I mean, I'm sorry. I know you'll be mad for a little bit, but I think it was worthwhile. And it was probably another 3 years before I got another one and actually got going. I mean, that's God's honest truth. That's what happened with the book that I bought and the first time I heard of it.
I think if my wife had been able to go back in time from before she met me, since I started playing before I met her, she would have thrown away whatever the equivalent of that book would have been. It would have been my spreadsheets downloaded that I made myself of all the projections I thought players were going to play that year.
Yeah. So like 3 years passed, and then I was in law school, and they had a little league, and so I joined. I didn't have a book then, and I was just kind of making it up, but I joined, and that's the first league I was in.
So you start playing in law school. Like, seems like a familiar story because I've had probably 4 or 5 guys on this show who have told me they started playing in law school. Is there something about being a lawyer that draws you to like translate well to the fantasy game?
Well, law school is super boring, and you need, and so there's drinking. And there's playing darts or whatever, and I thought, well, I got enough time to drink, play darts, and do fantasy baseball because I'm multi-talented that way. But the law school part, you just got to have something else to do, and so that's what I did.
At what point did you take it from being a hobby, a game you played, something you really enjoyed doing, into like the analysis portion of it?
Well, I used to because I'm weird this way. I told you I used to write to Whitey Herzog. Well, by then it was like rudimentary email on AOL had been starting up, and I started emailing John Hunt. John Hunt was at that time Baseball Today's kind of fantasy guy, and was probably the guy that everybody knew the most in fantasy baseball. Although I think today half the people who are even analysts probably haven't heard of him. But he was a big deal. And, and they had like a print publication that came out every week. And in it, there would be a mailbag question, a fantasy baseball mailbag question. And I routinely and religiously answered that question over and over and over and over and over. And he started emailing me back and started saying, I really like your answers. I can't pick you every week. It's not we're a publication. We got to spread it around, but you're doing it's really good. I'm really happy, and we kind of got to be friends. And at the same time that happened, I got to be friends with Rob Nyer, who I think most people do know who he is. And he was at ESPN at the time, and we talked about sabermetrics. So I was writing back and forth with both those guys. And it just so happened, luck, that Ron Chandler started looking around for writers. He had HQ going, and he had very few writers. He had a few, like maybe 5 or 6, and he was looking for to expand his business, Baseball HQ. And he knew both John Hunt and Rob Nyer, and they both said to me I should apply. So I applied. And Ron said, send me a writing sample about something I otherwise would not know. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, is there anything that I know about baseball that you do not know? Probably not. That's what I thought at the time. And so I decided I would write an article about bullpens and how they work and what they do. And it was stupid. I mean, I still have it. And if everyone today, I'm embarrassed by it, honestly. But he liked it for whatever reason. And he goes, I want you to come and be my bullpen writer. So I've been at HQ ever since. It's been that was like 1999 that happened. I mean, it's supposed to like 22 years. That's how old I am. I mean, I was old then, so I'm really old now. But I'm still the bullpen writer. I mean, nothing's changed at all. Ron's left. New people have come in. I mean, I still think of Ray and Brent as new guys. I mean, they probably started the year after I started, which means like I'm like, yeah, you're new guys. It's ridiculous, right?
So this actually kind of just stole one of the questions, or the next question I had for you,
sorry.
because you go and I look at your Twitter profile and it says baseballhq.com bullpen writer, and the question was going to be like, do you have like some sort of self-loathing that you like to write about bullpens? Like why would you submit yourself to that type of torture?
I think it's probably, it sounds like the most ridiculous thing because everybody, everything changes in 2 days all the time. But on the other hand, it's a lot of job security because no one else wants to do it, right? So you can be really bad at it, but if you're the only one who wants to do it, you're probably going to stick around.
I guess that's fair. I mean, it's some of the like most tedious activities in fantasy. It's actually good to write on those things because you have to do it anyways, and at least now you're getting paid to do it, right?
Yeah, and honestly, and I've done this for pretty much the whole time I've been writing. I just take a giant spreadsheet of all the different relievers, and I just filter it different ways based on, you could pick anything, but a good basic one is like, strikeout percentage minus walk percentage. I mean, just so basic. But if you filter by that and say the last 30 days, these are the guys who've been pitching the best, for the last 30 days. And then you look at that list, you cut it off at maybe 15, and you're like, who's interested? Here's the list. Who's interesting on this list? Let me talk about them, relative to who else is in their bullpen. And people respond to that because they're trying to figure out who's going to be the next guy that can get them saved, that is not, that is available, that isn't taken, and that's what that is. So I just try to slice and dice it different ways with filters and then talk about guys that I think are interesting. And, it's worked out so far.
So you're all, on top of being a regular at Tout Wars and at Labor, you're also a regular at First Pitch. And I talked off air about how much fun it is.
Oh, yeah.
If someone is thinking, oh, man, I've never been to First Pitch, I've heard some good things, give them your pitch. Tell them why people should go to First Pitch Arizona.
Well, the first thing is that all the different people that you follow, and I don't care what source it is or who it is, from The Athletic to Baseball Prospectus to everyone, shows up there. The best players, that play in NFBC that win the huge money, they show up there. And so you can talk one-on-one with them over a beer about anything you want to talk to them about. And that is invaluable because And, back in the early days, it would be, hey, I'm thinking about getting Zach Britton on my team. Do you think that's a good idea? You can have a much better discussion than that. There's baseball actual scouts there that will talk to you all day long about minor league guys that are playing in the games you're watching. I don't know what's better than that. We went one year and it was, we're watching and this guy comes up for the Cardinals that was a last minute fill in from Peoria Chiefs, and whacked a home run on the first pitch. And we're all like, who the hell is that? Well, it was Albert Pujols. And we just watched him hit a home run off a blue chip AAA guy without even thinking about it. And the scouts were all like, oh my God, like none of them saw this coming either. Like it was like that moment was true for us, but it was also true for these scouts. And that's exciting. That's new and different, On the other hand, you run into guys like Jeremy Brown. You know who Jeremy Brown is? Jeremy Brown was a catcher that the Oakland A's in the book Moneyball were really, really hot after because he was an on-base guy, before he got drafted. And so they overdrafted him. And all the scouts were like, he's going to suck, because he doesn't have a great body type and he's not a great catcher. And they had a million reasons why he wasn't going to be good. Well, guess what? The scouts were right. He wasn't any good. But at the Arizona Fall League, we watched Jeremy Brown hit a home run. And that was pretty exciting. That was like, oh, my God, the guy for Moneyball. He just hit a home run. So that was pretty fun. I'll tell you, there's a lot of downtime, and and as this event has grown, you just spend a lot of time with people and I spend a lot of, I've been going longer than most people, but I think all I mostly do is listen. You just happen to be sitting at a table, and the table happens to have, high stakes players who play daily or play, try to win the overall in the main event for NFBC. And they are just talking about what they do, how they do it, why they do what they do, what they're concerned about. And what's better than that? You're not even going to get that on a podcast or reading an article ever. They're not going to talk on a podcast. They're not going to give you stuff in an article. But at the AFL, they will. How's that for a pitch? Is that a good pitch?
I think it's a perfect pitch. I've talked about, I think on here, sitting at, around a fire outside at the hotel with it was Matt Modica and Rob Silver, and they were getting drunk, and I was taking notes on my phone while smoking a cigarette. Yeah. They were just talking game theory, and I learned a lot from that 30-minute conversation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and they do it every night. I mean, it's and for them, it's fun because they get together, like once for the draft at the beginning, if they get together in the same city, and then at the AFL, they get together. And, every different writer, and that's the other thing. You have writers who've been around for 25 years, but you also have writers that you have the guys who are out there on Fangraphs that are inventing the new metric that changes the game too. And they come in and they explain their new metric. And if you understand what they're talking about and you can put that to use, you probably got a leg up on other people. I mean, it's amazing to me the different amounts of talent and also how deep people can get into different things that are all helpful in some way. So I don't know where else you'd want to be if you play fantasy baseball seriously.
And the beauty of it is you get to I think it was Nick Pollock was introducing a new topic last time that we had it, and I was there. And you can actually go up to Nick and be like, "Hey, I didn't understand that. Can you explain it?" And you will. It's just a really, really cool atmosphere.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's terrific, and it's it's the best time of year to be in Phoenix. I mean, the weather's perfect. You're at ball games where hardly anybody else is there. The only other people there are scouts and wives and girlfriends, and then us nerds. That's really the only people who are there. So you sit right behind home plate and you see everything going on. And half the time, the scouts are talking about these 20 players, and then you see two other players that you're like, I'm writing them down because they just absolutely kicked ass while we were out here, and that sometimes works out too. And it's just a really fun time if you like baseball. You could go and not even play fantasy baseball and have a good time, I think.
It's an absolute blast. I really, really enjoyed going last time, and I will be going this year with my wife. She is excited. She wants me to throw her a birthday party while we're there because her birthday is I I think the week after or something like that. And I was
Well,
like,
I think that's a great idea.
yeah.
I think it should be a birthday party. She was a draftable catcher. I didn't draft her. I feel bad about that, but I went a different direction. I got catchers a little earlier, than I could have got her. But I have some regrets sometimes. I could have got it.
If I have a big enough lead at the over her in the TGFBI overall at the end of the season, I will pick her back up.
I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think it will. Honestly, I was so confident coming into the season, and nothing has gone right on this team. It is close to being, of 29 teams, it is close to being the worst team I drafted this year.
Is she better at fantasy football than fantasy baseball?
Yes and no. The thing about fantasy baseball as opposed to fantasy football is fantasy baseball is a marathon, right? It goes on forever. And so if you make a mistake I forgot to do fab this week. It's not a good thing. You don't want to do that, but you can overcome it. Yeah. Whereas in fantasy football, you miss 2 fab periods in a row or don't sit your lineup one weekend. That could be the end because there's only 13 weeks in the fantasy football season before the playoffs. And so she's won a fantasy football championship in our home league before. She will never let me forget that she won and she beat me in the championship. But I think that she
beat you in the championship.
Yes. This is a league that's been going on.
It's world. Oh my God. She must have been over the moon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a league that's been going on since I was in high school. So it's coming up on its 20th season. This may be its 20th season actually. And I have probably finished second place 8 times and won 4.
You're pretty good then.
Yeah, but I mean at the same time, 8 times someone has beaten. This last year was my best friend who had been in the league for 20 years, had never won. I was the best team and he beat me. This is why I hate head-to-head.
This is like Derek Carty in Labor NL. Is he always beats me. I always finish second. He finishes not always, but a lot. I finish second a lot. And what's funny is that one time I was out with Steve Moyer, who we talked about before we came on, who's R.I.P. Steve, miss him a lot. But we were out having beers at a there's a bar out in Scottsdale that we always like to go to, and I could tell you stories about that, but I'll skip that for now. We're out having beers, and Derek Carty shows up, and he's got this really good-looking young girl with him, and he goes to me and Steve, and he goes to her, and he goes, "I'd like to introduce you to my 2 gay dads. This is Steve, and this is Doug." And so we played along, and we said, we're so proud of Derek. He's done so well. And she was impressed by that. She was like, man, he's very progressive.
Derek is one of those guys that he seems so quiet and reserved, but every once in a while he'll do something like that. And so it does not surprise me. I think I've actually heard this story before, but that's amazing.
Yeah, so he always beats me in labor, and I have to say I'm so proud of my son.
Oh, that's great. Doug, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, well, it's always fun. I'm happy to join you. This was a lot of fun.
Remind everybody again where you can reach on social media and then plug all your work.
Yeah, so I am at DougDennis41 on Twitter. That's the only place I am on social media, and I'm at baseballhq.com. Write a bullpen article every week. It comes out on Sundays, subscription only, unless Brent puts it on the other side of the wall, which happens sometimes. So check it out.
And then before I let you go, the last question I ask everybody who comes on here is, let's say someone's listening and they go, I want to be like Doug, I want to do what he does. What would be the one piece of advice you give to someone aspiring to follow in your footsteps?
I think that's a tough question to answer in a short amount of time. But I do think that if you are passionate about something and really love it, you can work hard and pursue it. And, I don't know when, like a good example of that actually is you. I mean, you hustled, you worked your ass off. You were on like every podcast, you chased people down, you put this league together. You did everything you could to put yourself on the map, and then bam, you were on the map. And it didn't take very long. I mean, this type of thing, and I mean, I hope people on this know who Emily Walden is. She's actually someone who works for the Athletics. She did the same thing. She just hustled her ass off, went to tons and tons of minor league games, met every scout she could meet, got herself in situations where she learned about how to be a scout and evaluate talent and sold it to the Athletic. I could go on, but I mean, that kind of hustle is the way to get where you want to go, whether it's in fantasy baseball or anywhere. And I think it's easy to say and really hard to do, frankly.
I completely agree. I think, I tell people all the time, like, this is the first year where I haven't like only gotten 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night because I'm writing up until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning every day. So, and it takes that, I think. You've got to make sacrifices and got to work hard.
I think that's right. And especially if it's something that's a mature industry like fantasy baseball is now. Now, when I started back in the 90s, it wasn't. And so, if you knew the 3 or 4 important people, maybe you could just, hop in there. And I got lucky, and that's what I did. Honestly, if I didn't know Hunt or Nair, I don't think Chandler would have hired me, and I think, but I think those guys were not easy to know. It's just, I luckily, talked to them all the time and it worked out. But, that was before it became a mature industry. Now, so much is going on that, that's not going to be the path. So you really have to hustle your ass off. And if you do that, then good things will happen.
Absolutely. Doug, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah. Happy to do it. Do it again soon.
That will do it for another episode of the Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational Podcast. Again, give Doug a follow on Twitter and go and read all of his work over at Baseball HQ, where you should be subscribing if you're not already. You can reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. You can reach TGFBI on Twitter at TGFBI. And you can follow my work over at Fangraphs, Friends of Fantasy Benefits, and TGFBI.com. Hear me on this podcast, the Friends of Fantasy Benefits podcast, and the Sleeper in the Bus podcast. That will wrap us up for this episode. For Doug and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball season.
First place in my league, got a blockbuster on the way, and a pickup up my sleeve. They call my team insane, say I'm the one to beat. So you better bring your A game and start playing, cause every single week another win for me.
Yo, Commissioner, you can just pay me now. City win first place, then take a bow. Finish on top, I'ma set the standard. Don't believe me, you could check the standings. When I draft, I'll make smart selections. Got more sleepers than a narcoleptic. Meet your match, kid, my lineup's nasty. It's far-fetched thinking you might catch me. No surprise, I'm taking home the prize. Only time I rest is a playoff bye. Make amazing finds off the waiver wire all day and night. Better stay retired. See me in first, all proud and cozy. Bro, please, I can't even count my trophies. Bragging, even when my bats are slumping, I'ma pack a punch, that track a junkie.
I'm the one they don't wanna play. First place in my league, got a blockbuster on the way, and a pickup up my sleeve. They call my team insane, say I'm the one to beat. So you better bring